Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. So glad you're here, because today we're doing something really fun. We're going to reverse engineer a fantastic piece of children's literature called Kaka Munni by the award-winning Indian author Natasha Sharma. But look, we're not just reading a bedtime story today. We're going to deconstruct exactly how this text uses classic narrative structures to teach young minds about complex problem-solving, community, and literary devices. Honestly, it's a total masterclass in hiding the broccoli in the mashed potatoes. All right, let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the bully and the bird. Then, the vain crow's wild chase, followed by the village stands together. After that, we'll look at brains over brute force, and finally wrap up with the magic of sound words.
All right, part one. The bully and the bird, setting the stakes. You know, every good story needs immediate, understandable stakes, and this one nails it right on the very first page. The visual contrast is just striking. We meet Munni, this clever little sparrow perched in a bright red glomahar tree. She's just watching over her 3 little eggs, waiting for them to hatch. But then, boom, a flash of black enters the scene. This is Kaka, the crow, and he's explicitly introduced as the village bully. He doesn't mince words either. He flies right up and literally says, "Move over, Munni, for I have come to eat your eggs." It's an immediate threat. Brute force is right at the sparrow's doorstep, and man, the stakes for young readers couldn't possibly be higher.
But here is where the story completely pivots from a simple tragedy into a brilliant lesson in strategy. See, Munni doesn't try to physically fight Kaka. I mean, she's way too small for that. Instead, she weaponizes his own personality against him. The text tells us Kaka is incredibly vain. He always wants to look his absolute best. So Munni quickly chirps back this genius line. "Before eating my eggs, could you please wash your beak since it is looking very dirty?" And wow. That single sentence is the catalyst for the entire rest of the story. She just threw a massive psychological roadblock right in front of the bully.
Moving into part two, the vain crow's wild chase, the narrative engine.
So let's see how that psychological roadblock turns into what literary scholars actually call a cumulative tale. This is the engine of our story. If you're not familiar, a cumulative tale is a narrative where the action builds through a series of expanding, repetitive steps. So Kaka flies to the stream to wash his beak, but the stream, who is totally on Munni's side, refuses. The stream says, "If you dip your beak into me, all my water will become dirty." It tells Kaka to go get a cup, so off he goes to the village potter for a cup. But the potter says, "Hey, I gladly will, but I need mud." Kaka goes to the field for mud, but the field says it's baked hard and he needs something sharp to dig it up. You see what's happening? It brilliantly illustrates how a simple task is suddenly escalating into this absurd, inverted quest.
Just look at how this cascades into a totally ridiculous checklist Kaka has to fulfill just to wash his beak. The stream needs a cup. The cup needs mud. To dig the mud, he needs a deer's horn. To get the horn, he needs dogs to hunt the deer. The dogs demand milk before they hunt, and to get milk from the buffalo, well, the buffalo demands juicy grass. For a young reader, this isn't just fun. It's an incredible memory game and a hidden lesson in sequence and logic. It shows exactly how one action relies entirely on another. And Kaka's vanity? It has completely blinded him to the fact that he's being sent on a wild goose chase. Okay, section 3. The village stands together, the climax.
So what happens when he finally reaches the end of this absurd chain? Well, to cut the grass for the buffalo, the grass whispers to Kaka to go get a sickle from the blacksmith. Kaka, who is super hungry and losing his patience by now, flies to the blacksmith and recites his entire massive checklist of demands. But the text drops a key detail here. It notes, the blacksmith, like all the others, wanted to save Munni's eggs. The entire environment has been working together. The blacksmith asks Kaka to open the furnace door and put a piece of iron in it. And Kaka, in his frantic hurry, does it without even thinking.
And here comes the poetic justice. As he opens the furnace, a sudden gust of wind knocks him backwards onto the coal, burning his tail. The text gives us this perfect wrap-up. Since Kaka always wanted to look his best, he could not bear to be seen with a burnt tail, so he flew off, never to be seen again. It's absolutely crucial to note that Kaka isn't defeated by being beaten up. He is defeated by his own fatal flaw. His vanity started the wild chase, and his vanity is exactly what makes him flee and shame at the end. That is just brilliant narrative symmetry.
Which brings us to section 4, brains over brute force. Thematic lessons.
Stepping back from the plot for a second, let's look at the actual educational payload delivered in the textbook's comprehension section. The Check Your Understanding page doesn't just ask basic true or false questions. Down at the bottom, under Think and Answer, it really pushes young minds to analyze the themes. It asks, what is the writer's message about cleverness and quick thinking through Munni's actions? And everyone in the story worked together as a team. Why did they do this? The textbook is actively guiding the reader to realize that, hey, this wasn't just a story about a bird and a crow. It's actually a blueprint for handling conflict.
When we compare the two characters side by side, the lesson is super obvious. On one side, we have Munni. Her primary traits: cleverness, quick thinking, and the ability to inspire teamwork from the stream, the field, and the blacksmith. On the flip side, Kaka represents vanity, impatience, and bullying brute force. The story clearly demonstrates that brute force can be entirely derailed by just a little bit of strategic thinking and community solidarity. The entire village basically stalled the bully until he defeated himself. Honestly, that's a highly empowering message for any young learner.
Finally, Section 5. The Magic of Sound Words, Linguistic Tools.
Let's look at the hidden language building happening alongside all this drama. The text actually uses the narrative to teach a very specific literary device, onomatopoeia. As defined right in the textbook's Enjoying the Story section, onomatopoeia refers to sound words. Things like chirping, whispering, and crying. The text explains to the student that these are a fun, creative way to help us imagine and experience the world. By giving the animals, and even the grass, a specific sound, the author subtly builds a sensory environment that young readers can actually hear in their heads as they read along. The workbook then takes it a step further and reinforces this retention with specific exercises. Students are asked to identify things and animals that make specific sounds, and then later match the animals with their correct sounds based on the story they just read. It's a really interactive way to ensure that this new vocabulary actually sticks.
Breaking that workbook game down, we can see exactly how the vocabulary expands. Munni the sparrow is associated with chirp. Kaka the crow uses caw. The dogs bark. The buffalo uses grunt or bellow. And, I love this one, the grass and wind whisper. So when the grass tells Kaka to go to the blacksmith, it literally whispers it. It gives personality to inanimate objects and animals alike, expanding the child's descriptive vocabulary so naturally through the context of a thrilling chase.
I want to wrap up our explainer today with this final, incredibly provocative question pulled straight from the textbook's Think and Answer section. It asks, can you think of a different ending to the story where Kaka learns a lesson and becomes a friend to Munni instead of going away? This brilliantly shifts the entire focus from simply outsmarting an enemy to the concept of rehabilitation and empathy. It asks the reader to step right into the role of the author and reshape the narrative toward peace, rather than just victory. It is a massive testament to how layered and thoughtful children's literature and the educational materials that go with it can really be. Think about it. How would you rewrite that ending? Thanks so much for walking through this structural breakdown with me today. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.